Well, many people know Lowkey as a rapper, a playwright and a poet, but it's fair to say they even more know him as a fierce advocate for the rights of Palestinians and a fierce critic of Israel. The first and only time we've spoken was in the immediate aftermath of October the 7th. Israel and its supporters couldn't see beyond the horrors of that atrocity. Its critics were angered by how quickly it eclipsed decades of Palestinian suffering and heralded a great deal more. A lot has happened since then, but has anything really changed? Karim Dennis, better known as Lowkey, joins me in the studio now. And from Washington, D.C., I'm joined by the Lebanese-American author and activist Brigitte Gabriel. Well, welcome to both of you. Lowkey, we never met, so it's good to meet you. We had a pretty fiery exchange last time when I was in New York and you were here. Passions were running very high. I think it's fair to say from my experience of debate since, there's been no dilution in the way people feel about this. If anything, I think views are getting more and more entrenched as it goes on.
What is going on, everybody? Welcome back to Z's Political Couch, where we cut through the spin and dive straight into the bold truths that are shaping our world. Today we're breaking down the explosive, and I mean explosive, face-off between Lowkey, the unflinching Palestinian rights advocate, and Piers Morgan, the media titan, as they debate one of the most contentious issues of our times: Israel's growing list of enemies, from accusations of hypocrisy to calls for accountability. This debate spares no punches. Stick around to see Lowkey's fearless takedown, especially at pause 3 of Piers' double standard and a no-holds-barred critique of Israel's actions. Let's get into it.
What is your feeling about where we are now with this war and indeed the widening conflict with Israel apparently planning a ground incursion into Lebanon?
Well, that initial interview, there were three things that I stated which have since come clearly to fruition. So the first thing that I stated was that Mark Regev belongs in The Hague. Israel is currently in the ICJ charged with genocide. I also said that what Israel was doing in Gaza in an accumulative way over decades would amount, with the military operation that they were about to launch, to genocide. And the third thing that I said, which has also now been proven to have been the case, is that the Israeli military unfortunately implemented the Hannibal Directive on October 7th. And that, just so viewers are aware, is when Israel, of course, it was initially developed in Lebanon while trying to suppress the Lebanese population and stop them from battling the Israeli occupation. And it's whereby Israel takes measures to kill the captives who are Israeli that have been taken by the other side. Now, that happened on October 7th, and it's since been proven in 3 different cases. It happened, unfortunately, after...
It's been denied by Israel, to be clear.
It hasn't, though. It's been denied by certain upper echelons of the Israeli political establishment, but there have been key figures within the Air Force that have acknowledged that this has taken place. It's also been revealed by the Al Jazeera investigation, and other places too have gone very deep into it.
But you wouldn't say that the absolute vast majority of people killed and wounded on October the 7th were indeed killed and wounded by Hamas, because apart from anything else, Hamas were boasting about it and filming it as they were doing it.
I think actually the majority of people that were killed on October 7th and off the back of the October 7th were the Palestinian fighters that entered into what is considered to be Israel.
But we know
because they were killed, they were run over by cars, their bodies were dismembered. There's footage that came out of them being killed.
You feel sorry for the Hamas?
No, I'm stating objective facts as a journalist that has researched this topic.
But what about the 1,200 people who they murdered and the 7,000 they wounded?
No. Hundreds of those people were killed when Israel implemented the Hannibal Directive.
That's simply not true.
It simply is true.
It isn't.
And I encourage you, in the spirit of journalistic inquiry and curiosity, to really look that up.
It's already been thoroughly investigated.
It absolutely has not
been.
But
it has, Lowkey.
It's been investigated by Al Jazeera. It's been investigated by trustable news sources that have found this to be the case.
No, it's not true that hundreds of people in those named casualty numbers on the Israeli side
were killed by Israel.
No,
it's a fact. It's a documented fact. It's a documented fact. And you know what else? If you were to study those cars which were put forth as evidence that Hamas had killed those people fleeing the Nova Festival, the order came directly from the Israeli Air Force. This is a mass Hannibal. This is a dead zone. No cars will pass.
Did you watch the documentary?
Those cars
Did you watch
were
the
hit by
documentary
Apache.
last week on BBC Two?
Lowkey is dropping bombshells of truth here. But let's not pretend this is a fair fight. Piers' denial feels less about evidence and more about preserving Israel's carefully constructed narrative. Is Piers defending actions that no one else would tolerate if roles were reversed? As the debate heats up, Piers tries shifting the focus to Hamas and Hezbollah's goals of destroying Israel, but Lowkey masterfully redirects, exposing the power imbalance. Does Hamas have F-35s or satellites capable of targeting a shoe? No, this is asymmetrical warfare on a massive scale. Piers struggles to counter, instead resorting to emotional appeals about hostages.
No.
About the music festival, right? You literally see Hamas fighters with their GoPros going from car to car, murdering people.
That happened. Yeah, that happened.
Why are you trying to diminish the scale of what was going on?
I've just said that happened. That doesn't equate to diminishing what you've just
It doesn't
stated.
say hundreds
You're
of hundreds.
You're diminishing Apache helicopters bombing cars that contained civilians. You're diminishing all of the Israeli captives that have been killed by Israeli airstrikes. Israeli captives have come out of Gaza and said very clearly that actually they were scared of being killed by Israeli airstrikes.
Why are
They
there
were not.
hostages at all?
Well, this is, of course, an issue of 70 years of occupation, of dispossession, of ethnic cleansing,
You wouldn't
of
support the
attritional
taking of hostages,
genocide.
including Holocaust survivors and babies. You wouldn't support that.
I wouldn't take hostages, no.
So should they hand them back?
I think if you look historically at where the return of actual hostages has happened, you look at the case of Gilad Shalit, this was a case where an Israeli soldier was given back in exchange for the release of Palestinian prisoners. What you've actually seen in this case is a massive increase of Palestinian prisoners who are being tortured. There's been examples of rape within Israeli military camps. The rapists have come out and become celebrities within Israeli society. 68% of the Israeli population say they oppose the prosecuting of people that have been implicated in rape within the dungeon system. And if you really look at it, Israel has far more chance of returning hostages by negotiating for their release than by airstriking them. What Israel has done as part of this campaign is airstrike and kill its own captives, the captives.
How would
held
you
on
have
the other side.
responded on October the 8th if you were running the Israeli government?
Ultimately,
The biggest terror attack on your people ever.
Ultimately, it is within the interests of everybody, especially those who identify as Israelis currently, to end Zionism. Zionism has dispossessed and disempowered and killed people on an industrial scale. Its maintenance requires 4 generations of Palestinian refugees scattered throughout the Middle East, the highest population of refugees there is in the world. Its maintenance requires the constant repression of Palestinian hopes for a better world.
Which I think is completely wrong. So I believe all Palestinian people should have exactly the same rights as you and I and every Israeli.
And that requires the end of Zionism. So therefore you support the end of Zionism.
Well, I don't agree with what has clearly been a form of occupation, okay? But putting that to one side, I also don't agree with Hamas, Hezbollah and the Houthis, funded by Iran, armed by Iran, launching wave after years and decades of terror attacks on Israel.
Do they have air forces? Do they have? Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question.
Let me ask some questions.
Do they have air forces and air defenses?
Let me ask.
Do they have air forces and air defenses?
So it sounds like you're defending what they do.
No, I'm saying there is a complete difference between one of the most powerful armies in the world, which has literally a key unit within the Israeli military, Unit 9900, is the visual unit which uses satellites in the sky that can pick off a bit of chewing gum on your shoe, okay? You're talking about actors that are shooting rockets which do not have precise targeting against one of the most powerful air forces in the world.
It sounds to me,
F-16s and F-35. You're talking about asymmetrical warfare. But you know the thing that Israel doesn't remember, and which Israel has to know and must know, that winning a war is not about killing on an industrial scale the weakest among the population you are targeting, which Israel excels at, which is the essence of Zionism. Winning a war is about the largest amount of people being convinced of your viewpoint.
This is mic drop level analysis. Lowkey isn't just critiquing tactics, he's exposing the core of Israel's strategy as moral bankrupt. And Piers, he's retreating into the same tired talking points. By the final stretch, Piers invokes Iran's support for groups like Hamas and Hezbollah, framing Israel as the eternal victim. But Lowkey fires back with devastating critique of Zionism itself, calling it an anti-life ideology sustained through oppression. The kicker? He points out how as aid bankrolls this entire system, even as Israeli leaders push policies amounting to ethnic cleansing.
If we use that metric to understand this war, Israel has lost in Gaza and it will lose in Lebanon because Israel has more enemies around the world than ever before. More people are critical of Zionism than ever before. More people understand it to be essentially an anti-life ideology, which is causing mass human suffering.
But Lowkey, at the same time, Hamas, Hezbollah are wedded, and make no secret of being wedded, to the destruction of Israel. The destruction. That is a nihilistic form of genocide. The very genocide that its supporters, like you, would say is being waged against their people. They are explicit. We want the destruction of Israel. And they have tried to enact this on October the 7th. And Hezbollah's response the next day, within hours, was to unleash rockets on Israel as well and to carry on doing it for a year. At some point, Israel obviously was going to respond with massive force to the biggest attack on its people. Obviously, they were going to do that. Hamas knew they would do that. Iran, who were funding it, knew they were going to do that. Hezbollah knew they would do that. Hezbollah knew if they kept rattling the Israel cage with their rockets, that they would get a response of the kind we're seeing now. What they underestimated is that Israel would be quite as successful as they're being right now with Hezbollah and taking out all its command leadership. And you can feel that the momentum has switched now, where Israeli people, in particular, and all the polling, are now beginning to go back to supporting Netanyahu because they believe, rightly or wrongly, but they believe Hamas and Hezbollah when they say, we want to destroy Israel. They believe it, and they believe that they have to defend themselves. Do you understand that?
I have a response. The Likud platform, which is its charter, states very clearly, there will be no Palestinian sovereignty between the Jordan River and the Mediterranean Sea. The Likud charter calls for the complete obliteration of Palestine and all of the rights of Palestinians. That is the core of the issue. One group that you're talking about don't have air defenses and do not have an air force. Internationally isolated.
As you know.
And are internationally isolated.
And yet they were
the
somehow...
other one has the support of the United States, which has over around 1,000 military bases around the world. And, of course, all of the largesse from literally the US after Israel has taken its terrorist actions, which the former head of the CIA, Leon Panetta, called it a form of terrorism in Lebanon with the pager attack. Right after that, the US has said it's going to give $8.7 billion in military aid to Israel.
Lowkey just blew the lid off the biggest hypocrisy in this debate. If one side's charter is evil, why isn't the other's? Piers has no answer because there isn't one. Just more excuses for double standards. This debate was a masterclass in exposing hypocrisy. Lowkey came armed with facts and fearlessness, while Piers relied on deflection and denial. Whether you agree with Lowkey or not, his arguments cannot be ignored. If you loved our bold, unfiltered analysis like this, hit the like button, smash the subscribe, and ring the bell for more cutting-edge politics debates. See you all around in the next one.